Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss the 2011 version of The Muppets, starring the Muppets you know and love, as well as Jason Segel, Amy Adams, and Chris Cooper, directed by James Bobin. Now, before I get into this movie, I have seen it before and I remember really liking it so much, and will it be the same as I think of it now? Let's think about it by getting into the show. We open with Walter, who's a Muppet, with a human brother, Gary, who will grow up in a town called Small Town and be played by Jason Segel, as Walter narrates how he grows up loving the Muppets, as Walter was made fun of growing up for loving them too much, as he's a diehard expert of the Muppets, as he more looks like a Muppet than a human, and Gary is always there for Walter, as he stayed at the same size, while the opening intro to the Muppet Studio music playing in the background and watching it for years is. And this opening reminds me of why I loved the Muppets as a kid. When the Muppets invite Walter into the show as it was a dream, and wakes up as Gary invites Walter to join him and his girlfriend Mary, played by Amy Adams, to join them in Los Angeles as he wants to see the Muppet Studios and sing a song about life as a happy song, which is cheerful for a Disney film. And they pack up and pick up Mary at her job as a teacher at a school, and the students love learning and studying from Mary, which honestly isn't very realistic, but I'll go with it. And this is another cutesy role from Amy Adams, and it sort of reminded me of another Disney film she did called Enchanted, as she wants Gary to propose to her hand in marriage and finish the song until they leave small town going to LA. And this was a cute opener, and I really like how much it reminded me of the late 1970s Muppet Show, as that was delightful. Gary and Mary and Walter get to the Muppet Studios tour as it feels abandoned. Like at one point, a couple asks if it's Universal Studios as they're not well known anymore, while Alan Arkin, as a cameo, says yes, it is. While Walter looks inside Kermit the Frog's office and Tex Richmond, played by Chris Cooper, who, along with a couple of evil Muppets, wants to make a Muppet museum, but that's not what is on his mind, unfortunately, as he wants to put it an oil company, as what Walter overhears and screams in fear for hours and tells Gary and Mary about it as they look for Kermit to warn him about what Tex will do to the studio. As nighttime comes and they find Kermit's house and throw Walter at the electric fence, and Kermit finds them in front of his house and invites them in, and Walter, Gary, and Mary inside and talk with Kermit about Tex, who is going to do the studio as change the studio into an oil company, and they explain Texas plan to tear down the theater unless for the next 2 weeks, unless they come up with $10 million and get the Muppets together and put on a great show. And Kermit sings about the pictures in his head, and the script works as a Disney film, and I'm admiring what it from director James Bobin. Walter gives Kermit advice to make people laugh again, and play the music and light the lights again. And Kermit decides to save the theater with Gary, Mary, and Walter as they drive up and pick up the Muppets, starting with Fozzie the Bear in Reno, Nevada, as he performs with a ripoff team called the Muppets. Think of it as cows, I don't know. As they're more aggressive than the Muppets are, as Kermit approaches Fozzie and they get to Fozzie's office, which leads outside, and Fozzie is terrified of his office as well as the Muppets and decides to go with Kermit and the Muppets and go to the Great Gonzo next, as he owns a plumbing company and is a very busy Muppet, and try to tell him to get back together and says no until his wife Camilla the chicken says to him he knows what he really wants and terminates his plumbing company permanently. And I like that this is a movie about the Muppets getting back together, and I really, as in the first movie, it was about how they got together, and this is a movie about how they get back together, and I really like that as a plot. They get to Animal and as he has a trigger word in his drum, which is drum, as is Jack Black's trigger word, as it's also Tuesday, which made me laugh, and pick up the rest of the Muppets, and they travel by map to go to Paris, France, and ask the lovely Miss Piggy, and bump into another cameo by Emily Blunt, and Fozzie gets an idea to do the Muppet Man and tell her he has an appointment with Miss Piggy, As this was reminding me of The Devil Wears Prada, which is not a kid's movie, by the way, as maybe some might have seen it, as the Muppets man comes into Miss Piggy's office, and they fall down and she sees Kermit, and she kisses him at first and says to herself how strong she is, is until Walter says to her the theater is in danger, and she wants to talk with Kermit alone, and they talk at nighttime, but she says no at rejoining the Muppets, and there's no replacing Miss Piggy. And they get a replacement, I guess, who was in the Muppets. Miss Poogie, I guess is the character's name, but it sounds more like a dude man than a female, although Miss Piggy was voiced by a dude man too, and this character is kind of annoying, Miss Poogie, I mean, and I love seeing Animal and Miss Piggy, as they always crack me up. The Muppets get to one studio after another and getting rejected as they meet CDE executive, who's played by Rashida Jones, or her character's name is Veronica, as one of the shows gets canceled by the Muppets, and not by the Muppets, and gets the Muppets having a show, as they need a celebrity host, and get inside the studio as it looks like a fixer-upper, and we get some old memories of the Muppet Show from the late 1970s, and Gary, Mary, and Walter rebuild the theater with music, and while Kermit calls one celebrity after another and gets repeatedly rejected, and it is all cleaned up, and Gary and Mary talk about their anniversary dinner, which was why they went to LA in the first place, as Walter is hired to be a part of the Muppets, and rehearsal comes the next day, and Miss Piggy comes in, beating up on Miss Poogie, and says there's only one Miss Piggy, and she is moi. And that's my favorite line of this whole movie, as I quote it almost every day. And sorry to say that to you guys, but it's unfortunately true. The Muppets rehearse and mess up every single time, as there's no drums, while Kermit asks to do something for the show, as he says he doesn't have talent. Well, Kermit asks Walter that, and who says he doesn't have talent, while Fozzie finds fart shoes, which is unnecessary, as this is a PG-rated movie, while Mary eats out on her own, with Sarah Silverman cameoing as the waiter, and Mary and Miss Piggy sing about having a me party, which was a fun scene, as Kermit tries to ask Miss Piggy for a duet, and practices a scene from the movie Dirty Dancing with Pepe. And the CDE executive, Veronica, seems reluctant about putting the Muppets on the TV, and they have a meeting with Tex about giving back their theater, and he has an embarrassing rap song about money, as I felt bad for Chris Cooper, as he's a better actor than that, as the Muppets come in and have a new hire that looks like Fozzie, and shows Fozzie to humiliate him, as Kermit gives up on the show 6 hours before showtime, and Miss Piggy gets an idea to kidnap a celebrity, as Gary forgets about his and Mary's anniversary, and that was heartbreaking, as she was upset, and I don't necessarily blame her, as Gary was a bit distracted, I'll say at best. And I really like the characters, and I'm glad we're back to a likable Muppet movie again, whereas the last couple of times were a downer, and this movie works better than those two movies, in my opinion. Gary asks Walter for help about why Mary is mad at Gary, while Walter asks Gary for help with what talent he has for the show, as Gary realizes he forgot his anniversary dinner and tries to make it up to Mary until she writes a note saying she went back to small town, and Gary and Walter sing about if he's a man or a Muppet, or if they are, I'll say, while Walter gets a portrayal of a man being cameoed by the Big Bang Theory's Jim Parsons, or as I always call him, Bazinga. And that was a very good song, and there's a very good reason this won for Best Original Song of Oscar for the year of 2012, as Gary goes back home and to Mary. Meanwhile, Miss Piggy gets the idea of kidnapping Jack Black as a celebrity host for the Muppet Telethon, and knocks on Kermit's door and shows them what they can do for what they do for each other. And Tex sees on the TV the Muppets are putting up a show with Jack Black, while one of his assistants believes they're working for the bad guy. Veronica believes the show is a disaster until it starts, and it works out so far, and they take calls for anyone who donates money for the theater, as Gary and Mary watches while Jack Black is scared for his life, as he's the best cameo in this whole movie. As I've always been a Jack Black fan, what can I say? The Muppets get their first call to donate some money for the show and audience members coming in to see the show, as the audience is loving it while Tex is trying to come and destroy them, as Walter is afraid to be on stage as he runs off stage. And Kermit sees Whoopi Goldberg, Selena Gomez, and some kid getting on the phone as they move on to Jack Black getting a haircut at a barber shop. And Kermit introduces Camilla and her chickens singing CeeLo Green's Forget You. Yes, that's a song by CeeLo Green. I'm not going to make that up. In their backpack, in their buck, buck, as what chicken sounds like nowadays. Like buck, 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 buck. Anyways, as Neil Patrick Harris and John Krasinski get on the phone, as Tex breaks their electrical power and Gary and Mary save their electricity, as it was told she can fix a car, as we saw earlier in the movie. And Tex wants one of the Muppets to help him break their electricity, and betrays Tex. And as Kermit still has the photo of Miss Piggy, and she had the photograph of Kermit earlier in the film, while Scooter the Gopher is doing some hosting and pretending the audience is naked in a PG-rated kind of way. And Kermit says to Miss Piggy he needs her, which is super sweet of Kermit to say that to Miss Piggy. And I love that scene. Oh, Kermit. Like that, see? I quote that sometimes too. Kermit sings the song from the first Muppet movie, with Miss Piggy joining along with them, as well as the other Muppets, including one of the ones in the band. And Animal decides to bang on the drums again, and he loves it. As Kermit asks Miss Piggy to stay with him, as they're almost at $10 million, but they have no more acts, while Walter is afraid to go on stage because he's afraid of people laughing at him, as they have 2 minutes until they go back on stage. And Gary tells Walter to try to use his talent, and it runs out of time, and Walter whistles for the last act, as that's his talent. After he finishes, they almost reach their goal to save the theater. And Tex breaks off the electricity by car, as he says he's beaten them, and asks the Muppets to leave right away, and they do, while Fozzie makes the farting noises with his shoes, which is once again unnecessary. And Kermit tells the whole Muppet gang to make a speech, as he believes in all of them, as they have a ton of fans outside. As they walk outside the door, people cheer for the Muppets, as well as Walter, and sing One More Song About Life as a happy song, which was sung in the beginning of the movie. And Gary proposes Mary's hand in marriage, like Mary predicted. And she sings Phenomena, which is a song from the original Muppet Show from the late 70s, in the very first episode, I remember. And credits roll as Tex gets hit by Gonzo's bowling ball that he was doing earlier in the last act, and loses his memory and gives the Muppet Theater back to the Muppets, and the Muppets lose big time. And the climax was fun, as it was reminding me of the old Muppet Show from the late 1970s, as well as the other shows from the past, as that was a pleasant way to end this movie. How pleasant was this movie? Let's get to the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.3 out of 10. This is a movie about getting the Muppets back together, whereas the first movie was about getting them together for the first time. Well, I like this as a plot, and I really enjoyed how this movie gave me memories of the 1970s Muppet Show. And I'm glad we're back to a likable Muppet movie again, as the last couple of times were a downer, but this movie works, as I like the songs as they were pleasant for a Disney film, and Jason Segel was great. Amy Adams played a cutesy role like she did in another Disney film, Enchanted. And I felt embarrassed for Chris Cooper in one scene, but he's a better actor than the rap song they gave him about money he had. But he was good here too. And once again, Animal and Miss Piggy were my favorite Muppet characters, and I liked the cameos, as Jack Black's cameo was the best one in my opinion. And I admire what director James Bobin has made for the Muppet name, despite he's done a couple of forgettable films, like the Dora the Explorer movie, which I didn't see, and the Alice in Wonderland sequel that wasn't very good. And I'll see how he does next time with Muppets Most Wanted. I had a good time with the movie, as this was a cute movie and something I would watch again and again, but I'm not sure about the next one, as it has been a while since I've seen that one. But as far as this one, it's a solid recommendation to return to the Muppets as a movie franchise, I mean. Despite Miss Poogie and the Muppets were kind of annoying when they showed up on screen, but at the end of the day, I really liked the movie, as it was a good time and it was pleasant. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time we'll be back with Muppets Most Wanted. And until then, drabs, 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 drabs.